number that should keep you up at night. The United States has approximately 16 million vacant homes, and only around 650,000 homeless people. Read that again. We have 24 empty homes for every single person sleeping on a street. So why are people still homeless? Why are people still broke? And why are there entire American cities where you can buy a house for less than a used Toyota Camry? Because here's what nobody in a real estate ad will tell you. Cheap doesn't mean good. Cheap sometimes means the tap water will give your kid lead poisoning. Cheap sometimes means the nearest grocery store is 45 minutes away. Cheap sometimes means your neighbors aren't people. They're feral dogs and collapsing Victorian facades and the ghost of an economy that packed up and left in 1987. Today we're counting down 10 places in the United States of America, the richest country in the history of human civilization, where living conditions would make a UN inspector reach for a clipboard. Houses are shockingly affordable. The reasons why are even more shocking. Hit that like button if you're brave enough to see number 1, and subscribe, because trust me, you are absolutely not ready for where this is going. Number 10, McAllen, Texas, and the Colonia. Let's start in Texas because Texas loves going big, even with its poverty. South of McAllen, strung along the US-Mexico border like broken beads on a forgotten necklace, are places called colonias. And before you assume that's a travel term, let me be specific. Colonias are unincorporated subdivisions, legal American territory, where somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 people live without reliable access to clean water, sewage systems, or paved roads on American soil in the 21st century. Picture this. You drive 40 minutes south of McAllen, a city itself ranked among the poorest metros in the country, with a poverty rate hovering around 30%, nearly triple the national average, and the asphalt just stops, like the road gave up. You're now on caliche, where it's a kind of compressed limestone dust that turns to ankle-deep soup when it rains. The houses, if you can call them that, are a patchwork of plywood, corrugated tin, cinder block, and ambition. Some are perfectly kept, little gardens fighting the heat with an almost heartbreaking stubbornness. Others are held together by a combination of wire, prayer, and the specific Texas will that refuses to admit defeat. The median home price in Hidalgo County sits around $140,000 right now, which sounds almost reasonable until you realize that many Colonia properties list for $30,000 to $60,000. And those prices come with infrastructure you'd find in rural Guatemala, open drainage ditches, septic tanks that are gloriously, catastrophically failing, wells contaminated by agricultural runoff carrying pesticide cocktails your body was not designed to process. The Texas Water Development Board estimates that roughly 20% of Colonia residents still lack access to safe drinking water. You'll find people who've lived in America their entire lives, paying American taxes, whose children drink water hauled in jugs from a gas station 20 miles away. On local Facebook groups, the conversations are heartbreaking and weirdly funny at once. Does anyone know who to call about the sewage smell on Calle Cinco? It's been 3 weeks. The response thread has 47 comments and 0 solutions. McAllen's unemployment rate bounces around 8 to 10%, consistently among the highest in Texas. The summers are an assault, 100-degree heat that feels like standing inside a dog's mouth. And yet people stay, and they build, they plant things, because this is home, and home doesn't have to be perfect to be worth fighting for. But if you thought the border was isolated, number 9. Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown used to be a city, a real one. In 1930, it had 170,000 people, a skyline you'd actually bother to photograph, steel mills running 3 shifts, and the specific swagger of an industrial town that believed the good times would last forever. The good times lasted until September 19, 1977. They even named the date Black Monday. That's the day Youngstown Sheet and Tube announced it was closing its Campbell Works facility, laying off 5,000 workers in a single announcement. It was the opening act of a deindustrialization tragedy that would gut the Mahoning Valley over the next decade, erasing 50,000 manufacturing jobs and about 100,000 residents who followed them out the door. Today, our Youngstown has somewhere around 60,000 people left, a population that has more in common with a small college town than a mid-century industrial powerhouse. The poverty rate sits at a staggering 38%. The median household income is around $27,000. And the median home price? Buckle up. It's approximately $55,000. You'll find houses on Zillow for $15,000 to $30,000 that have good bones, decent neighborhoods by local standards, and the specific melancholy of a life interrupted. What makes Youngstown philosophically fascinating and practically terrifying is that the city has leaned into its shrinkage. They call it smart decline, a deliberately managed retreat where the city demolishes abandoned structures rather than pretending revitalization is around the corner. They've torn down thousands of abandoned homes. What's left are these strange urban prairies, city blocks where 8 houses once stood, and now there's just open land, tall grass swaying, the faint grid of old sidewalks still visible, leading nowhere. Walking through certain Youngstown neighborhoods feels like visiting a city after some quiet apocalypse. The apocalypse had no drama, no explosions, no disasters, just a slow bleeding out of economic purpose. Reddit threads about the city are either deeply nostalgic, "My grandfather worked at Republic Steel, those were real jobs," or darkly pragmatic, "Bought a house here for $28,000. It's fine, don't walk anywhere after 10 p.m. The violent crime rate is roughly 4 times the national average. The schools are perpetually underfunded. There are entire zip codes where you could buy every single property on the street for less than a studio apartment deposit in San Francisco. And yet, there's a stubborn, genuinely moving arts community here. Young people buying cheap houses, turning empty storefronts into galleries, planting urban gardens in the lots. Whether it's enough to save the city or just the most beautiful rearranging of deck chairs in Ohio, the jury is still deliberating. Number 8, Beattyville, Kentucky. Imagine your car breaks down at night somewhere in the Daniel Boone National Forest. The hills are gorgeous, genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of landscape that makes you understand why people wrote folk songs about this place. Rolling green, ancient hollows, a creek somewhere making sounds you'd pay good money for on a white noise app. Then morning comes, and you start walking to find help, and you realize there's nothing here. There's nothing anywhere near here. Welcome to Beattyville, Kentucky, county seat of Lee County, population approximately 1,300 people, and a place that has worn the title of America's poorest white town, like an unwanted crown. The poverty rate in Lee County consistently hovers between 38% and 42%. Median household income, roughly $22,000. The median home value sits around $65,000, though you'll find properties scattered through the surrounding hollows listed for under $30,000. And some of them have been on the market for years, because even at $30,000, the calculus of living here is complicated. Why is it complicated? Let me paint you the full picture. The nearest Walmart is 45 minutes away on winding mountain roads that ice over in winter with genuine murderous intent. There is no chain restaurant. There are several dollar stores, which in modern American poverty geography function as grocery stores by necessity. There is a Dollar General where you can buy off-brand cereal, a Hot Pocket, and a questionable vitamin supplement, but you cannot buy fresh produce. This region, Appalachian Kentucky broadly, was devastated by the opioid crisis in ways that are difficult to overstate. Beattyville was identified by the New York Times as one of the epicenters of prescription painkiller abuse, earning brutal headlines about the heroin capital of America, a title that stuck like a wound that won't close. The crisis swept through family structures here with the efficiency of something designed to do maximum damage. Parents, then children, then entire extended family networks. Walk the main street and you'll see a beauty salon that closed, a hardware store holding on, a church that's open every day of the week. This is Kentucky, so actually there are 6 churches. The Lee County School District has consistently ranked among the lowest funded in the state. The broadband internet situation, critical for anyone trying to work remotely, which is theoretically the lifeline for places like this, is spotty at best, non-existent in many surrounding hollows. And yet people post on the Lee County Community Facebook page with a warmth that would embarrass cynics. Lost dogs found, casseroles delivered, fundraisers for medical bills that insurance, when it exists, won't cover. The social capital here is real. The financial capital has long since moved somewhere else. Number 7, Chester, Pennsylvania. 6 square miles. That's the entire city of Chester, Pennsylvania, squeezed between Philadelphia's southwestern suburbs and the Delaware River, close enough to Delaware to smell the tax-free shopping, close enough to Philly to hear the Eagles games on a still night. 6 square miles, and they've managed to pack an absolutely extraordinary concentration of American urban failure into every one of them. Chester is technically a city of about 34,000 people. Its poverty rate is north of 40%. Its violent crime rate has, in various years, ranked among the top 5 in the entire nation. A remarkable achievement for a city most people in neighboring counties couldn't find on a map without GPS. The median home price is approximately $85,000, which initially sounds almost reasonable, until you understand that half of Chester's housing stock is in various states of disrepair, and that the school district, Chester Upland School District, has been in financial crisis so severe that the state of Pennsylvania has had to intervene multiple times to make sure teachers got paid. Drive down Welsh Street or Edgemont Avenue on a Tuesday afternoon, and you'll see the dual reality of Chester. On one hand, genuinely beautiful old Victorian and federal-style architecture. This city was built once, built with intention and civic pride, and the bones of that ambition are still visible in the stonework and the old commercial buildings. And on the other hand, those same buildings half-gutted, boarded up, tagged, slowly returning to constituent materials. Chester has one of those unique American backstories where racism and economics became so intertwined that you can't separate the threads. White flight to the suburbs in the 1950s and 60s drained the tax base. Industrial jobs along the waterfront evaporated. Public housing was concentrated here while investment fled to neighboring Delaware County suburbs. What's left is a community that has been structurally divested systematically, for 70 years, and is now somehow expected to pull itself up when the bootstraps were repossessed decades ago. The people who stayed, and there are good people who stayed, who love this broken little city with a ferocity that demands respect, will tell you about the block captains who keep their corners clean, the church ladies who run the food pantries, the coaches who show up for the kids. They're doing real work in a structure designed to make real work feel impossible. The Reddit thread for Chester, Pennsylvania has a pinned post that just says, "Yes, it's rough. No, it's not hopeless. Welcome." That about covers it. Number 6. Pine Ridge, South Dakota. There are places on this list where I'll make jokes, where the dark humor is an appropriate coping mechanism for absurdity. Pine Ridge, South Dakota is not one of those places. Pine Ridge demands a different register. The Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, home of the Oglala Lakota people, sits in the southwest corner of South Dakota, spreading across nearly 3,500 square miles of rolling high plains. It is roughly the size of Connecticut. It is, by virtually every measurable metric, one of the most impoverished places in the United States of America. The numbers are not comfortable. The unemployment rate historically runs between 80% and 90% on the reservation, not 8 to 9%, 80 to 90. The average per capita income is approximately $8,768 per year. Life expectancy for men on Pine Ridge is estimated at around 67 years. Lower than many developing nations, lower than North Korea by some estimates. The infant mortality rate is 3 times the national average. Diabetes and heart disease rates are catastrophically elevated. Alcohol, banned on the reservation itself, flows in from the border towns with grim reliability. And its consequences, fetal alcohol syndrome, domestic violence, drunk driving fatalities, are woven into the community's statistics with terrible consistency. Housing on Pine Ridge is a paradox that defies the framing of this video. You can't easily buy a house here in the traditional sense. Most land is held in federal trust, a legacy of treaties and policies designed, in the bluntest possible language, as to make traditional indigenous land ownership legally complicated. People live in HUD houses, small, often overcrowded federal housing units, where it's common to find 12 to 15 people sharing a 3-bedroom structure. Overcrowding rates here are among the highest anywhere in the country. Winter temperatures drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Heating systems fail, pipes freeze, people burn what they can find. The Wounded Knee Massacre happened here in 1890. The American Indian Movement standoff happened here in 1973. The history of this land is the history of what happens when a government decides that certain people don't matter, Written in 130 years of accumulated consequence, there are people at Pine Ridge doing remarkable things: tribal colleges, cultural preservation programs, youth initiatives. The land itself is staggeringly beautiful, the kind of landscape that makes you understand why the Lakota considered it sacred. But beauty doesn't heat a house in January, and recognition doesn't undo generations of deliberate disinvestment. This is America. All of it is America. Number 5. East St. Louis, Illinois. Let's talk about a city that exists in the shadow of another city, and not in the romantic sense. East St. Louis, Illinois sits directly across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri. You can see the Gateway Arch from here. On a clear day, it's genuinely beautiful. The great American symbol of westward expansion, gleaming stainless steel, right there, across the water, like a promise made to someone else. East St. Louis has a population of about 18,000 people now. It had 82,000 in 1950. That's not a typo. They lost 78% of their population over 7 decades, a depopulation event of a scale usually associated with plagues or wars, achieved entirely through the mundane miracle of American economic abandonment. The median home value in East St. Louis is approximately $40,000. You will find properties on the market for $10,000 to $15,000. You will also find that the city's property tax structure is such a labyrinthine disaster: decades of unpaid taxes, unclear titles, tangled inheritance situations, that buying one of these dirt-cheap homes often requires a lawyer and a tolerance for bureaucratic suffering that would break most people. Here is the detail that I need you to sit with. East St. Louis has no grocery store. Zero. There is no full-service supermarket within the city limits. This is what food researchers call a food desert, but that phrase makes it sound peaceful and natural, like something that just happened. This didn't just happen. Grocery chains made decisions about profitability and left. The city had the tax base of a deflated balloon and couldn't incentivize them back. The result is that residents of East St. Louis either travel 20+ minutes to buy groceries or subsist on what corner stores and dollar stores stock, which is largely processed food engineered specifically to be both addictive and nutritionally bankrupt. The city has also had documented problems with raw sewage backing up into residential streets and homes, a sanitation failure that again requires me to remind you. This is Illinois, 2020s, United States of America. The violent crime rate is routinely among the highest in the nation. The school district has faced state takeover. Per capita income is around $13,000. And across the river, the arch gleams. The symbol of American expansion, doing what symbols do, looking great from a distance. Number 4. Flint, Michigan. You know the water story. Everyone knows the water story. In 2014, city officials switched Flint's water source to the Flint River to save money, failed to treat it properly, and the corrosive water leached lead from aging pipes into the tap water of approximately 100,000 residents. Children absorbed lead, a neurotoxin with no safe exposure level, for 18 months while officials told them the water was fine. A federal state of emergency was declared. Heads, eventually, slowly, rolled. You know that part. Here's what gets less coverage. Flint. Michigan is a place where the water crisis was possible because everything else had already fallen apart first. The water disaster didn't create Flint's problems. It was created by them. The city's population peaked at 196,000 in 1960. Today it's around 81,000. The poverty rate is approximately 40%. Median household income is around $30,000. The median home value is about $66,000. And you'll find houses on the market for $20,000 to $30,000 all day long, in neighborhoods that were middle-class American dream neighborhoods a generation ago. Walk through the Civic Park or Mott Park neighborhoods, and you'll see exactly what concentrated disinvestment looks like at scale. Block after block of houses at various stages of the abandonment spectrum, some occupied and maintained with obvious pride, some boarded, some open to the elements, some already demolished, leaving vacant lots that fill with wildflowers in summer and despair in January. There are streets where every third lot is empty. It gives the inhabited houses a strange, isolated quality, like they're stranded. The lead exposure crisis didn't end when the infrastructure was switched back. Lead in children doesn't leave. It doesn't clear out when the water gets better. The cohort of Flint children who drank contaminated water will carry the neurological consequences, reduced IQ, behavioral difficulties, developmental delays, for the rest of their lives. The full accounting of what that means for the city's future won't be visible for another decade or two. What we do know is that the public trust in municipal water service in Flint is shattered. Residents still, years later, filter their water obsessively or drink bottled. The psychological toll of being told your government poisoned you and then lied about it is not something that appears in real estate listings. The city has genuine resilience, an arts community, a university presence. So people who stayed and are building something, but you don't get credit for resilience by having your resilience continuously tested. Number 3, Camden, New Jersey. In 2012, the FBI declared Camden, New Jersey, the most dangerous city in America. That's not a local boast or a regional exaggeration. That's the Federal Bureau of Investigation looking at their numbers and saying, mathematically, this is the most violent place we track in this country. Camden sits directly across the Delaware River from Philadelphia, a city of about 73,000 people that exists in the geographic shadow of multiple major cities while somehow managing to be overlooked by all of them. New Jersey, one of the wealthiest states in the Union by average income, contains within its borders a city where the poverty rate runs around 40%. Median household income sits at approximately $28,000, and median home prices are around $90,000, with distressed properties regularly listing for $30,000 to $50,000. In 2013, Camden did something drastic and genuinely controversial. It dissolved its police department, completely, laid off the entire force, then rebuilt it as a county-wide department with different contracts, different accountability structures, different community policing philosophy. This was not received calmly. Critics called it union busting. Supporters called it a necessary reset of a department that had become expensive, ineffective, and adversarial with the community it served. Crime rates, which had been staggering, began to drop. They're still elevated by national standards, but the trajectory changed. That's Camden in miniature, bold, desperate, politically complicated, and occasionally effective. What Camden still doesn't have is a functioning tax base. Cooper Hospital is a major anchor employer. Rutgers Camden is there. But the commercial density that generates real municipal revenue, the restaurants, the offices, the retail, mostly doesn't exist. The waterfront has been developed into something almost attractive. Walk the Camden waterfront on a sunny Saturday, and it's almost normal, almost nice, with views of the Philadelphia skyline that you'd pay significant money to see from a rooftop bar. Then walk 4 blocks inland, and you're back in the Camden that makes the statistics make sense. Locals on Reddit describe Camden with the specific weariness of people who've given up explaining themselves to outsiders. Yes, it's rough. Yes, I still live here. No, I don't want to move. Mind your business. There's a chip-on-the-shoulder pride that makes sense when your city has been used as a symbol of failure for so long that even the residents start to absorb the narrative. Number 2, Gary, Indiana. Let me tell you about a city that was briefly one of the most important places in America. Gary, Indiana was built by U.S. Steel in 1906. They didn't find Gary, they made it. Incorporated from sand dunes and swampland on the southern shore of Lake Michigan, Gary was an industrial company town conceived at maximum scale. Steel mills stretching for miles along the lakefront, worker housing blocks radiating outward, churches and schools built alongside the furnaces as deliberate community infrastructure. By its peak in the 1960s, Gary had over 175,000 residents and was a legitimate American city in every sense. Jazz clubs, department stores, a thriving black middle class that had found in Gary's Union Steel jobs an economic foothold unavailable in the Jim Crow South. Michael Jackson was born in Gary, Indiana in 1958. He grew up at 2300 Jackson Street in a tiny house that still stands. He became the most famous entertainer on earth. He never moved back. That's not a knock on Jackson. It's a data point about what Gary became. The steel industry collapsed. U.S. Steel gutted its Gary operations through the 1970s and 80s. The city's population bled out, 175,000 to 140,000 to 100,000 to today's approximately 69,000. The poverty rate sits at around 35%. Violent crime is severe, and the housing market, here's your number, has a median home value around $60,000, with listings across Gary available for $15,000 to $35,000 for houses that had families in them 40 years ago. But the specific horror of Gary isn't the crime statistics or the poverty rate, it's the physical landscape. Gary has an estimated 10,000 plus abandoned buildings, a number so large it reshapes the visual character of the entire city. The abandoned City Methodist Church, a massive Gothic structure from 1926, stands open to the sky, its sanctuary filled with decades of debris and volunteer-planted saplings growing up through the floor. It's the most photogenic ruin in the Midwest, and urban explorers make pilgrimages from across the country to photograph it. The Palace Theater, the old Genesis Convention Center, block after block of commercial buildings that were full of people and purpose within living memory, now performing their slow-motion collapse. Nature is reclaiming Gary, Indiana, with the patience of something that knows it has all the time in the world. Trees grow from second-floor window frames. Vines wrap entire facades. The steel mills along the lakefront still operate in reduced capacity. You can see the glow from the furnaces at night, orange against the Lake Michigan sky, like a reminder that the industry didn't entirely leave, just trimmed itself to a fraction of what it was. There are people trying to reimagine Gary, artists colonizing the cheap spaces, a new casino that brought some revenue, the occasional optimistic think piece about the lakefront potential. Whether any of it adds up to something is a question that Gary has been asking for 40 years without a definitive answer. What Gary mostly is a monument. A monument to what happens when a single industry owns a city's soul and then loses interest. Number 1, Detroit, Michigan. We've been building to this. You knew it was coming. Of course it's Detroit. Detroit is not a story. Detroit is a genre. It is the American cautionary tale, the one that all the other cities on this list are smaller, less cinematic versions of. Detroit is what happens when everything goes wrong simultaneously, at scale, for decades, in a city that once had the audacity to call itself the center of the world. In 1950, Detroit had 1.85 million people. It was the fourth largest city in the United States. It was the arsenal of democracy, the Motor City, the place where Henry Ford invented the moving assembly line and accidentally invented the American middle class alongside it. Detroit had more registered boats per capita than any city in America. It had the most beautiful examples of Art Deco commercial architecture outside of Manhattan. It had a music scene, Motown, that quite literally changed global culture. Berry Gordy ran his little record label out of a house on West Grand Boulevard and produced the soundtrack to the civil rights movement. Detroit today has approximately 620,000 people. The population loss over 70 years, 1.2 million people, is the largest of any major American city in history, and it's not close. The poverty rate is around 30%. Median household income is roughly $34,000. In a city where the legacy infrastructure, water, sewage, roads, schools, was designed for 3 times as many taxpayers. The school district has been in state receivership. The city itself went through the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history in 2013. An $18 billion collapse that shocked people who didn't understand how long it had been coming. And the houses. Let's talk about the houses. The median home price in Detroit is approximately $85,000, which sounds almost reasonable until you understand that this median is propped up by the Midtown and Indian Village and Corktown neighborhoods, where genuinely beautiful historic homes are being snapped up by a small but real renovation wave. Outside those corridors, you will find thousands of houses available for $1,000 to $10,000. Not a typo. The city of Detroit itself has auctioned off tax-foreclosed properties through its Detroit Land Bank Authority for $1,000 down payments. There have been literal $1 house sales, though the catch is always the same. The house is a burned shell or structurally compromised or located on a block where every neighboring structure is also uninhabitable. Detroit has approximately 70,000 abandoned structures and around 23 square miles of vacant land within city limits. 23 square miles. You could fit the entire city of San Francisco inside Detroit's vacant land, with room left for parking. What this means physically, spatially, is that in large portions of Detroit, you drive through blocks where 1 or 2 houses remain occupied islands in a sea of demolitions and empty lots, grass-covered foundations, Occasional fire-burned stumps of what were once proud Victorian workers' cottages. Urban prairies that have reverted to a kind of wild, rough meadow beauty. Pheasants. Our foxes, coyotes, the occasional deer. Detroit has populations of pheasants living within the city limits. Wild pheasants. In a city. The water shutoff crisis, where the city aggressively cut water service to residents who fell behind on bills, which happened a lot during the bankruptcy era, left indelible psychological wounds. The fire situation. Detroit has historically had one of the highest rates of arson in the nation, much of it insurance fraud on abandoned properties, some of it pyromania, some of it just the inevitable end state of structures that no one is watching. In Halloween night celebrations that became infamous, there was a period called Devil's Night, when arsonists would set dozens of buildings on fire the night before Halloween. The city eventually organized Angel's Night, a volunteer patrol effort, and reduced the arsons dramatically. That this was necessary is itself a sentence about where Detroit was. And yet, and I mean this with complete sincerity, Detroit might have the most genuine cultural and culinary renaissance happening of any city on this list. The people who stayed in Detroit, and the people who moved there specifically because it's Detroit, have created something real. The Eastern Market is one of the best farmers' markets in the Midwest. The restaurant scene in Corktown is legitimately excellent. The murals covering the facades of buildings throughout Midtown and New Center represent an investment of community artistic energy that would be enviable anywhere. And the Detroit Institute of Arts houses a collection, including Diego Rivera's famous murals, that belongs in the conversation with the great museums of the world. There is a bumper sticker you'll see in Detroit that says, "Detroit versus everybody." It started as a chip on the shoulder. It evolved into a genuine identity statement. The people who stayed in Detroit, who chose Detroit, or who couldn't leave Detroit, or who came back to Detroit, have developed a relationship with their city that transcends normal civic pride. It's something closer to what you feel for a family member who's been through serious illness. A fierce, complicated, clear-eyed love that doesn't require the object of that love to be perfect. You can buy a house in Detroit for less than a gaming laptop. You can also find yourself embedded in a community with some of the most resilient, creative, and determinedly optimistic people you'll encounter anywhere in America. Whether the math ever fully adds up, whether the revival touches the Far East and West Sides, whether the school system recovers, whether the city's pension obligations get resolved in any satisfying way, remains genuinely, frustratingly uncertain. What is certain is that Detroit is the answer to the question this video has been asking from the beginning. How does a first world nation end up with third world conditions? Not through some sudden catastrophe, not through earthquake or war or flood. Through the slow, methodical disinvestment in the people, the economy decided it no longer needed. Through the tax base fleeing to suburbs designed to hoard resources. Through industries automating away the jobs that built the middle class, without building any path for the people those jobs used to support. Through political decisions, made by real people with real names, that protected the comfortable and abandoned the rest. Detroit didn't fall because of fate. Detroit fell because of choices, and choices, at least theoretically, can be made differently next time. So there you have it, 10 places in the wealthiest country on earth where you can buy a house for the price of a used car, and spend the rest of your life wondering if you got a deal. The easy version of this video would be mockery. Look at these terrible places. Aren't they awful? Aren't we glad we don't live there? But that's the cheap take, and we don't do cheap takes here. These places are complicated, and they have real people in them. People with dignity and ingenuity, and the specific stubborn pride of communities that know they've been written off and refuse to write themselves off in return. What they share isn't stupidity or laziness or any of the things comfortable people say about struggling places. What they share is being on the wrong end of economic decisions made somewhere else by someone who never visited. That's the through line from the colonias of South Texas to the prairies of Detroit. Distance between decision and consequence. When the people making choices don't have to live with the results get ugly. The houses are cheap. The cost of everything else is something you'd have to live there to understand. Drop in the comments, which of these hit you hardest? And if you've lived in any of these places, I genuinely want to hear from you. Your story matters more than any statistic I quoted. Like this video if it made you think differently about what affordable actually means in America. Subscribe because next time we're looking at 10 countries where Americans are actually emigrating to for a better quality of life. And the list is going to surprise you in ways that might be a little uncomfortable. Don't go anywhere. Trust me on this one.